Today I'm going to expose Gerudo for the conwoman that they are. They want you to believe their town is secure, and they flaunt their martial prowess, but in reality, their army is inept, and their defenses laughable. To aid me in this task, I am once again joined by Brett Pirate.
That's right, me and Draken have quite a bit of experience critiquing video game castle defenses, so it is a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Brett. Now, if you like what I do, subscribe. If you don't, I'll obliterate you. On to the video. There are three major topics we need to touch on in order to fully understand the issues with Gerudo's defenses. The geography of the surrounding land, in this case the desert, the architecture of the town itself, and finally, the military. Let's start with geography. While difficult terrain doesn't win wars, sometimes a good location can serve just as well as a tall wall, which shouldn't be news to anyone who has seen our previous video about Rito's defenses. Wink wink. So, how do the Gerudo fare on that front? In theory, the location of the town is advantageous. In theory. See, the inhabitants of the town, being native to an area with such a harsh climate, should be more than used to navigating the many dangers and benefits of living in the desert. Except that they aren't. Saying that the desert is unwelcoming is an understatement. The air is scorching hot during the day and freezing cold at night. Feet of an approaching army would sink in the sand, considerably slowing them down. With nowhere to hide, in a wide open and mostly flat space, any intrusion would be easy to spot from very far away. Not to mention that the desert will not provide food and water required to sustain an army. Gerudo should be at advantage here. But they aren't. It might be because many of the Gerudo aren't actually born and raised in the desert, but instead are brought into the town at a young age, or because Gerudo Town is much more forgiving to its inhabitants than the desert itself. Either way, Gerudo are, strangely, not really in tune with their environment. Like, at all. The situation is so bad, in fact, that during a visitation Zelda, a Hylian raised among rolling grassy fields suggested that maybe, just maybe, Gerudo should train to, do better at moving around and surviving in the desert. A Hylian from grassy fields told Gerudo from the desert that they don't know how to survive in the desert. That this conversation resulted in the creation of the Desert Mobility Camp and not a civil war is a diplomatic miracle. Between the issues of their dress, unsuited for the environment they find themselves in, general recklessness and lack of touch, I genuinely think the desert is more of a threat to Gerudo themselves than it is to monsters. Molduga can glide through sand like it's nothing, and so can Lysalphos. Bokoblins don't seem to be bothered by the heat. Erokuda and Moblin, while there aren't many of them living in the desert, also seem to be taking the temperature shifts just fine, not to mention Gibdos, particularly hardy creatures, infesting many of the region's caves. Thus, what should have been one of the primary advantages of Gerudo's position is instead a huge weakness.
And that brings us to Chapter 2 of this analysis, Architecture. In warfare, good architecture is key to good defenses. That is why monarchs build castles, why towns build walls, and why liches build perilous booby-trapped dungeons for adventurers to die in. However, in the case of the Gerudo, they seem to place way too much trust in architecture, which is frankly crap. And here's why. Exhibit 1. The walls. The walls of Gerudo Town are a sorry mess. See, the wall is certainly tall enough to prevent intruders from climbing over easily, but the issue is that it lacks defensive features. For instance, there are no parapets, there's no arrow slits, there's no machicolations. There's just a giant slab of stone, and that's it. Now, maybe at some point in ancient Hyrule, before the sands eroded these walls, it is possible that the Gerudo had genuine defenses here. But whatever there was in the past, that is no longer the case in present Gerudo Town. Additionally, take note of the 3 openings leading into the town. The more entrances that a fortification has, the more weak points that an attacker can choose to enter from. In medieval castles, defenders solved this vulnerability by adding retractable gates, arrow slits, and watchtowers. They added cauldrons to the walls, which could drop boiling water and tar on invaders, and they installed holes into the ceilings of the entrance so that they could drop even more booby traps and death down on the intruders. That way, any attempt to invade the entrance would be as difficult as possible. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Let's just soak this in for a minute. This is a beautiful entrance. And then this is the Gerudo entrance. They could not even be bothered to install a door. When the town is invaded by Gibdos and Tears of the Kingdom, this is all they could muster, a couple of wooden barriers. They didn't even have enough soldiers to guard the 3 entrances. During the siege on Gerudo Town by the Gibdo forces, they have to pick and choose which entrances are worth guarding. And by the way, did I say 3 entrances earlier? Because what I really meant to say is 4. There is a back wall on Gerudo Town, one which you don't often see, but it has another giant gaping hole in it, which is even worse than all the others. This is bad planning. Just imagine how much easier this siege against the Gibdos would have been if there had only been 1 entrance available. Then the Gerudo women would have been able to focus all of their manpower, or I guess woman power, on one singular entrance instead of spreading themselves out like they did in-game. Also consider these precarious stone pools which loom over the city and supply it with its water. I don't know if you have considered this, but these water pools on top of this stone pillar indicate that the water is being pumped up from somewhere, and yet there are only 3 thin pillars holding this structure up. This must mean that those columns are hollow. In fact, of all the towns in Hyrule with dangerous architecture, I would argue that this is the worst one because of how clearly unstable it is. If it were to fall, the palace and all of the neighboring buildings and even the bunker where the citizens are hiding would potentially be destroyed. And additionally, you would see flooding all over the streets as the aqueduct system leaks everywhere. And it would only take one well-placed bomb barrel to do the deed. However, the defenders of Gerudo Town do have a few key advantages. For starters, the walls of the town are ridiculously thick, so at least it's difficult for enemies to blast their way through the wall. Additionally, the inside of Gerudo Town is separated into districts, each with their own walls. This means that even if one district falls, the other parts of the town could still potentially defend themselves. However, this strategy only has a chance of working if they were to install gates on each of the tunnels in the town, and if they had good defenses in each section of the town, which they clearly don't. So for now, the sections idea, that's just a theory. It's also worth complimenting the bunker. It is a bit hard to access since it requires you to remove a giant stone slab of stairs in order to access it, but seemingly the Gerudo soldiers had no issue removing it in the case of the Gibdo invasion. The bunker also has a fresh source of water, a strong entrance, plenty of rooms for civilians, and a secret back exit in case civilians need to escape. As long as the monsters don't know that this exit exists, it's a very good bunker. So those are my thoughts on the architecture of Gerudo Town. Welcome to Chapter 3 of the video, the part where we analyze the strategies of the Gerudo military. Unfortunately, the quick and dirty summary is that the Gerudo military has no strategy aside from being more powerful and having better equipment than whoever their opponent is. But this works out pretty well for them when they are just fighting monsters in the middle of the desert. But it doesn't work out so well for them when they are pitted against a cunning enemy like the Yiga, of which the Gerudo are no match. That is the quick summary. But to understand the full reasoning, consider the military of the Roman Republic in 200 BC.
How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Every day, man. Every day. In many ways, the Gerudo and the Roman Republic are very similar. Both were efficient, well-equipped, and feared, but also extremely narrow-minded at varying points in their history. And that lack of imagination caused both armies to suffer tremendously. Allow me to demonstrate. During the 200 BCs, the Romans had the strongest military in the world. They were well-equipped, they were efficient, and they were organized. But they struggled to come up with clever plans or prevent clever plans from happening against them, which is what the Romans experienced a lot of during the Second Punic War against Hannibal of Carthage. Hannibal of Carthage is often considered the most cunning general of the ancient world, or, as the Romans would say, the most dishonorable general of the ancient world. It's easy to see why the Romans would feel this way. For an example, let's look at the Battle of Trebia. In the weeks before the battle, Hannibal placed spies in the Roman camp in order to learn about their military structure and their tactics. With this information that he collected, he realized that it would be very easy to lure the cocky Roman commanders into a trap. So, on the night of the battle, he sent cavalry to lure the Roman soldiers out of their fort in the middle of the night, which prevented the Romans from getting a full night's sleep. Then, he tricked them into crossing an icy cold river, which caused the Roman soldiers to be frozen from the cold. It made the battle a living nightmare for the Romans. And then, to top it all off, Hannibal hid a force of elite warriors south of the battlefield, so that after the battle started, he could call on these forces to create an encirclement around the Romans. Hannibal ended up winning that battle very handily, but whereas he only lost a few thousand men, the Romans lost over 20,000. This kind of dishonorable fighting is what Rome struggled with. They had no way of dealing with spies, they didn't scout the battlefield in advance, and they let themselves fall into traps. But like it or not, this is how war works, and the more unfair advantages you can gain, the better your army will perform. Now, look at the Gerudo. They're easily the best equipped, best trained, and largest military in Hyrule, yet throughout their history, they keep being infiltrated by spies, their scouts are getting captured, and they keep falling for traps. Like in Age of Calamity, when they get tricked by Koga into hunting down Princess Zelda. The Gerudo are not good at using their brains. So, against a simple force of monsters, the Gerudo are relatively safe, they're better equipped. But as soon as they go against a force with more than 2 brain cells and a banana, they are bound to lose the advantage. Great military, bad brains.
Yeah, Gerudo military is great, as long as they are fighting mindless hordes on pavement. I mean, I don't wanna be that Drake, but have you seen what they are wearing? These are just no, bad. I'm just, if you own high heels or have a loved one who does, put them on for a second and just take a walk across a lawn for me. I guarantee you, keeping balance on anything that isn't a hard surface will be a struggle. Now imagine trying to do the same thing on sand. It'd be way worse. Plus, it's not just about balance. Since sand is much looser than dirt, these heels absolutely will sink into the ground with every step these supposed soldiers take. Martial perfection. What a joke! As I've touched on before, Gerudo seem to, just in general, be blissfully unaware of the conditions they live in. This goes equally for the soldiers and the civilians. The high heels on sand issue is merely the tip of an iceberg. These people will frequently wander off, ill-prepared and alone, into areas of the desert well known for being particularly hot or inhabited by Molduga, or both. They will then get stranded due to monster threat or severe dehydration, requiring rescue missions to get them back safely. And they will do that for the dumbest reasons imaginable. What? You want to go into Molduga territory? Oh, you'd like to see if there aren't any cool new pieces you could use for your jewelry. And you'd like to do that while a giant sandstorm is raging. Yes, that sounds like a great idea. You go, champ! I'm sure you can do it! This general lack of common sense is very much present within the military as well. Gerudo completely fail to notice crucial security flaws, appear incredibly stupid, and see no issue with putting objects and people they need in order to survive at risk. They see no issue with the massive window behind their chief's back and refuse to guard it. They don't notice their soldier disappearing for days and then will get mad at their underlings for not stopping that soldier from leaving. They will entrust a literal cannon into the hands of a well-known chronic moron and then be surprised it was randomly fired. Though, to be fair, Link isn't blameless here. We're on to you, hero. Gerudo will also spill all their secrets to any random person who appeals to authority, just as they did for a disguised Link who claimed Buliara sent him. The the Gerudo captain did nothing to verify that claim, which is especially problematic since they are fighting the Yiga, who are known for using disguises. They knew they needed the Thunder Helm to stop Naboris, so they put it on display in front of a massive unguarded window. And then they acted surprised when it was stolen! They noticed Riju was the only person able to bring any harm to the Gibdo, so they just let her run off somewhere. Over the surface. Across the Sand Shroud. Alone! One of the guards cited her poor sense of direction as the reason she decided against doing her job. It is also apparent that, in spite of fighting the Yiga for quite a while now, Gerudo still are unaware of their enemy's greatest weakness. The sheer ineptitude! They also failed to put 2 and 2 together. In spite of seeing how effective Riju's lightning was against the Gibdo, no one thought that maybe the solution was to modify the weapons. Rather than using their heads and doing that, Gerudo decided that surely the spears must have been the problem. So they started training with swords and shields instead. It was only after Riju's display of power during the siege of Karakara that Gerudo realized elemental damage was key. Gerudo are just so terrible at their job, it would be hilarious if it wasn't so sad. Except all this is only half of the truth. In reality, Gerudo soldiers knew they needed to modify their weapons way ahead of the Karakara battle. Yet, they didn't do that. Why? You know, we can talk all we want about the desert, about the architecture, and Gerudo's matchups with various types of monsters. But really, when it comes down to it, their biggest weakness has nothing to do with any of that. It is instead a purely systemic issue, deeply rooted in Gerudo's military culture and leadership incompetence. Some of Gerudo Grants did realize what Gibdo's weakness is, but they were afraid to test it out or tell anyone. Their superiors would take it as a slight if they did, so these soldiers, instead of speaking up, just continued to execute orders, to the detriment of absolutely everyone. When viewed through the lens of this strict social hierarchy and pride, nearly all the baffling issues I've mentioned before start to make sense. Security issues with architecture? Unless someone high up in the chain of command notices, no one will say a word. Someone vanishes. Better not say anything and hope she comes back before anyone notices, or else it will be the Grants who will be punished. Someone who really shouldn't get the canon gets the canon? Nepotism. Lack of vetting? I'm willing to bet if the captain went to check with Buliara if she really sent Link to talk with her, she'd get some stern talking to, so she didn't. The chief wants to display her helm and ride off into the sandstorm? Who would dare oppose her? This is exactly the reason why Gerudo, in spite of being a militant faction, can't handle basic problems on their own. The societal structures are too rigid to allow agency for common soldiers. The Grants need to appear dumber than their captains, and the captains need to stay in line as to not anger their own superiors. Gerudo can't know better than the person above them, for if they did, that would be a direct attack on their superior's pride and, by extension, their position in the hierarchy. It is a matter of social order that lower-ranking Gerudo keep their heads down. With all that in mind, I am willing to bet that back when the Thunderhelm was stolen, the general paralysis Gerudo found themselves under was also caused by this exact issue. The Gerudo knew exactly who stole the helm. They knew it was Yiga. They also knew where the hideout was located. The official reason why their military hasn't descended on the clan yet was that they were too tired. Somehow, the entire Gerudo military was just too exhausted to retrieve an object crucial to the survival of the town. It is unstated, but personally, I think the real reason why Gerudo failed to do anything about the Yiga thieves was that the military leaders were simply too busy shifting blame between each other to do anything meaningful with the problem. You know, priorities. Unless they were actually too tired because they decided to chase the Yiga in their stupid high heels. I could believe that, yeah. Again, huge thank you to Brett for helping me out here. You're the best.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. I really enjoy being able to talk about Rome, the Gerudo.
Also a huge thank you is in order to my Draconic Sages. Jardind, Von Bob, Fiona, Giga Chickney, Merburb, Lofarty Destroy, and Medixai. If you enjoyed the video, please check out the other side of the collab, where we covered 10 facts about the Gerudo you probably didn't know.